Have you ever had an HOA president stand in your backyard and describe 3 replacement fence boards as a visual wound? Because I have. Not a collapsed fence. Not a leaning disaster held together with duct tape and prayer. 3 new cedar boards, clean, straight, freshly installed, and about 2 shades lighter than the old fence because apparently wood, unlike HOA presidents, changes color when exposed to weather. My name is Marcus Reed, and I was not trying to start a war. I was trying to fix a fence before my dog discovered freedom. The storm hit Briarfield Pointe on a Sunday night. Wind snapped branches, rain came sideways, and sometime around midnight a maple limb from my neighbor's yard crashed through the back corner of my fence. By morning, 3 boards were cracked. 1 rail was bent, and my German shepherd, Duke, was standing beside the gap with the expression of a man considering international travel. I patched it the same day. I went to the hardware store, bought cedar boards, cut them to size, replaced the damaged pieces, and made sure the fence was secure. Was it a perfect color match? No. Was it safe, clean, and functional? Yes. Did it keep Duke from introducing himself to the entire subdivision like a furry tax auditor? Also, yes. I thought that would be enough. Then Valerie Cross arrived. Valerie was the HOA president of Briarfield Pointe, a woman who dressed like she was permanently on her way to reject a country club application. Cream blazer, gold bracelet, clipboard, sunglasses, and a smile so thin it looked legally binding. She didn't walk into yards. She entered them like a royal inspector evaluating peasant construction. I was cleaning up sawdust when I heard her voice behind me. "Marcus, we need to talk about this fence injury." I turned around slowly. "Fence injury?" She pointed at the 3 new boards. That is a repair. It is an obvious patch. Yes. That is how repairs work. She stepped closer, staring at the boards like they had insulted her bloodline. The replacement wood does not match the aged tone of the surrounding fencing. It will weather. That could take months. "Valerie, the storm was yesterday." She opened her clipboard. Section 10, paragraph B of the Briarfield Pointe Exterior Continuity Code requires all fencing visible from neighboring properties to maintain consistent material, color, finish, height, and visual rhythm. Visual rhythm? Yes. My fence does not have a drum solo. Her mouth tightened. You had 48 hours to submit a repair application before making visible exterior modifications. A tree punched through it. Emergency damage does not exempt aesthetic review. From the kitchen window, Duke barked once, as if even he knew that sentence was insane. Valerie handed me the violation notice. $300. 7 days to correct the mismatched and unsightly patch. Failure to comply would result in daily fines, forced contractor review, and possible lien assessment. I stared at the paper, then at the fence. "You're fining me for fixing storm damage?" "I'm fining you for creating an ugly repair." There it was. Ugly. She said it with the satisfaction of someone who believed beauty belonged to her personally. I looked at the 3 clean boards again. They were stronger than the broken ones, safer, newer. They had done their job. But Valerie didn't care about safety. She cared about the sacred beige illusion that nobody in Briarfield Pointe ever had storms, dogs, repairs, or lives. I folded the notice and slipped it into my back pocket. "So you want the fence to look intentional?" I asked. "I want it to match approved architectural standards." "And if I replace more than the damaged boards?" She smiled, like she had guided a child toward reason. "A full fence project may be considered if properly submitted and architecturally cohesive." Architecturally cohesive. That phrase lit up something terrible in my mind. If you're watching Sovereign Verdict, subscribe now, because Valerie Cross had just told the wrong man that a fence repair was ugly. She wanted architectural cohesion. Fine. I was going to give her a fortress. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Valerie's violation notice, a cup of black coffee, and the kind of calm that usually means a man has either accepted defeat or found a way to become a neighborhood problem. I opened the Briarfield Pointe HOA documents. 318 pages. That is not a covenant. That is a paper-based hostage situation. There were rules about fence height, fence color, fence caps, fence stain, fence spacing, fence shadows, and one paragraph explaining that excessively whimsical gate hardware required prior approval. I did not know hardware could become whimsical, but apparently somewhere in Briarfield history, a hinge had gone too far. Valerie had quoted the repair rule correctly. Any visible fence repair had to match existing material, color, finish, height, and visual rhythm. My 3 cedar boards were newer, lighter, and therefore guilty of disturbing the rhythm of suburban wood. But then I kept reading. Because when an HOA president quotes one paragraph, there is usually another paragraph hiding nearby with a knife. At 1:06 a.m., I found it. Section 12, Paragraph G. Decorative perimeter structures, privacy enhancements, architectural garden walls, themed landscape boundaries, and historically inspired non-habitable exterior features may be approved when constructed of permitted materials, maintained in uniform finish, and integrated with the residence's overall design. I read it again. Historically inspired exterior features, architectural garden walls, themed landscape boundaries. Valerie didn't want 3 mismatched boards. She wanted cohesion. She wanted a full project. She wanted something that looked intentional. Fine. I was going medieval. The next morning, I called my friend Nolan, a carpenter who restored old houses and hated HOA language with the deep personal disgust most people reserve for food poisoning. I need a fence, I said. Normal fence? No, medieval fortress wall. He paused. Are we talking castle-themed backyard or legally defensible architectural spite? Yes, he sighed. HOA. HOA. I'll bring graph paper. By lunch, Nolan was in my backyard walking the fence line with a tape measure, a pencil behind his ear, and a grin that suggested he had been waiting his whole life for someone to weaponize carpentry. We were not building a stone wall. That would have required permits, engineers, and possibly a trebuchet budget. We were building a wooden fence that looked like a fortress wall while staying within HOA height limits and using approved cedar. That was the key. 6-foot cedar privacy fence. Approved. Uniform stain. Approved. Decorative top trim. Allowed. Gate features. Allowed with approval, if not whimsical. So Nolan designed a full replacement fence with vertical cedar boards stained dark walnut, square battlement-style top sections, faux stone-textured post caps, iron-look strap hinges, and a gate shaped like a small castle entrance. Every few panels had a shallow decorative arrow slit cutout backed with black mesh so it looked dramatic without exposing the yard. It'll be within the height limit, Nolan said, sketching the battlements. The raised parts count as decorative caps, not extra wall height, if we keep them under the cap allowance. Can we add a sign? What kind? I smiled. He sighed again. I hate that I already know. The sign would be small, tasteful, and mounted inside the gate, visible only when opened. Read keep established after the Great Board Mismatch incident. Nolan loved it so much he underlined keep twice. Of course, I knew Valerie would attack the project before the first board came down, so I did something she never expected. I submitted an application, a full architectural improvement packet, measurements, materials, stain color, fence height, renderings. A description using every elegant phrase the HOA loved. Historically inspired privacy enhancement, cohesive perimeter replacement, uniform architectural boundary, storm damage correction through complete design integration. I did not write medieval fortress. I wrote European heritage garden wall aesthetic. Nolan looked over the application and said, "That is the most pretentious way anyone has ever described a castle fence." Thank you. 3 days later, the approval came back. Conditional approval. Valerie had signed it. I stared at the email for 5 full seconds, then started laughing so hard Duke barked at me. She had approved the fortress because the drawing looked classy in black and white. She had seen dark walnut cedar, decorative caps, uniform materials, and heritage aesthetic, and her brain had filled in some tasteful English garden wall from a magazine. She had not imagined battlements. Saturday morning, Nolan arrived with 2 workers, cedar boards, posts, dark stain, decorative caps, iron-style hardware, and enough confidence to make my neighbors slow their cars. By noon, the old damaged fence was coming down. By 3, the first new section stood upright, dark, tall, uniform, and unmistakably shaped like the outer wall of a small suburban castle. Duke stood in the yard, staring at it with total approval. At 4:12, Valerie's white SUV stopped so hard at the curb that I heard the tires chirp. She stepped out wearing sunglasses, a cream blazer, and the expression of a woman who had just realized the peasants had discovered architecture. She marched into the backyard without saying hello. "What," she whispered, "is happening to your fence?" I held up the approved application. "Architectural cohesion." Valerie looked at the approved application like it had personally betrayed her. She held the packet in both hands, flipping between the rendering, the material list, and the actual fence rising behind me, board by board. Nolan's crew kept working with the calm confidence of men who had been paid in advance and emotionally supported by spite. "This is not what I approved," Valerie said. I pointed to the first page. Dark walnut cedar privacy fence with decorative upper cap treatment. She looked at the battlement-shaped top. "Those are castle blocks." Decorative upper cap treatment. "These are arrow slits." Ventilated privacy accents. "That gate looks like it belongs on a dungeon." "European heritage garden entry." Nolan coughed into his fist and turned away. Valerie's jaw tightened. "Mr. Reed, this community does not permit medieval militarization of residential boundaries." I blinked. "Is that a rule?" "It is common sense." "So, no." She pulled out her phone and began taking pictures. "Construction must stop immediately pending emergency review." Nolan lowered his nail gun. "Do you have a stop work order from the city?" Valerie stared at him. "I am the HOA president." "That's not a city." The neighbor behind me, Mr. Alvarez, opened his back door and leaned out. "For what it's worth, I like it." Valerie snapped. "This does not concern you." "It's facing my yard," he said. "I think that makes me the audience." Duke barked once from the patio, which felt legally supportive. Valerie stormed back to her SUV, promising an emergency architectural hearing that night at 7. By then, Nolan had completed the entire back run of fencing. From inside my yard, it looked absolutely ridiculous in the best possible way. Dark cedar walls, square battlements, black mesh arrow slits, faux stone caps, and a gate that made my German shepherd look like the commander of a tiny kingdom. At 7, I walked into the Briarfield Pointe clubhouse with a binder under one arm and saw the room was packed. Of course it was packed. The phrase medieval fortress fence had spread through the neighborhood faster than storm damage. People stood along the back wall, whispering, smirking, and checking their phones for photos. Valerie sat at the center table in a navy blazer, flanked by 3 board members. Elaine, who ran landscaping, looked nervous. Howard, a retired building inspector, looked curious. And Patricia, the secretary, looked like she had already decided this meeting was going to be excellent. Valerie slammed the gavel. This emergency session concerns Lot 27, where homeowner Marcus Reed has exploited an approved fence repair into an unauthorized castle wall. I stood. Historically inspired privacy enhancement. Someone laughed. Valerie glared across the room. Mr. Reed, did you or did you not construct a medieval-themed fence? I constructed the approved fence shown in my application, using approved cedar, approved stain, approved height, and approved decorative cap features. She held up the packet. Your application did not say fortress. It said European Heritage Garden Wall Aesthetic. Howard adjusted his glasses. It does say that. Valerie snapped. Howard! He raised a hand. Just reading. Handed copies to the board. The original violation was for mismatched repair boards. I submitted a full cohesive replacement project, as Valerie suggested. The approval was issued in writing. The fence is uniform, safe, within height restrictions, made of permitted materials, and integrated with the house's design language. Valerie pointed at the photo on the screen. It has battlements, decorative caps, arrow slits, backed accents, a castle gate. Elaine studied the photos. It is very uniform. Valerie turned toward her. Uniformly absurd. Absurd is not listed as a violation, Howard said. Patricia wrote that down, smiling faintly. Valerie's voice sharpened. The architectural committee approved a privacy fence, not a theatrical boundary wall. Then the committee should not have approved historically inspired exterior features under Section 12, Paragraph G, I said. I flipped to the highlighted covenant page and passed it forward. Howard read aloud. Decorative perimeter structures, privacy enhancements, architectural garden walls, themed landscape boundaries, and historically inspired non-habitable exterior features may be approved when constructed of permitted materials, maintained in uniform finish, and integrated with the residence's overall design. The room murmured. Patricia looked up. Themed landscape boundaries. Yes, I said. That is the phrase doing the heavy lifting tonight. Valerie's face reddened. This is retaliation. Absolutely, I said. Retaliatory compliance. You fined me for 3 safe repair boards because they were ugly, so I replaced the whole fence with one cohesive design you approved. Before Valerie could answer, the clubhouse door opened. Nolan stepped inside, wearing a clean work shirt and carrying a rolled-up plan tube. Behind him walked a man in a county building department polo with a clipboard. Valerie froze. I smiled. Funny thing about fortress walls, I said. I wanted to make sure mine passed inspection. The man from the county building department did not look amused, which made him instantly dangerous. He was in his late 50s, with a gray mustache, a tucked-in polo shirt, and the exhausted posture of someone who had spent his career explaining to homeowners that "I saw it on the internet" was not an engineering standard. His name badge read, Don Richards, Residential Permit Inspection. Valerie stood behind the board table like someone had opened a trap door under her authority. "This is an internal HOA design matter," she said sharply. Don looked at her, then at Nolan, then at me. "I was asked to inspect whether the fence violates county residential structure requirements." "And?" Howard asked, already leaning forward. Don opened his clipboard. 6-foot cedar privacy fence. Decorative top elements remain within allowable height variance. Posts are properly set. No prohibited materials. No sightline obstruction. No structural safety issue. No permit required beyond standard fence replacement documentation already filed. Valerie's face tightened. "What about the arrow slits?" Don blinked. "The what?" I held up a photo. "Decorative privacy cutouts backed with black mesh." Don looked at it. "They're not openings through the fence." "What about the battlements?" Valerie demanded. "Decorative top profile." Nolan gave me the smallest possible grin. Valerie pointed at the gate photo. "And that?" Don shrugged. "Gate." The room laughed. Valerie slammed the gavel. "This board is not here to be entertained." Patricia, the secretary, muttered, "That depends on the minutes." Valerie ignored her and turned back to Don. "So the county has no objection?" "No," Don said. "It's unusual, but unusual is not a code violation." Howard looked like he wanted that embroidered on a pillow. I stepped to the podium. "The original fine said my fence repair was ugly because 3 boards didn't match. Valerie told me a full fence project could be considered if it was architecturally cohesive. I submitted a full project. It was approved in writing. Now the fence is uniform, safer, storm damage-free, and county compliant." Elaine flipped through the approval packet. "The stain matches the submitted color." "Yes." "The height matches." "Yes." "The material matches." "Yes." Howard tapped the covenant page. "And the HOA rules allow themed landscape boundaries and historically inspired exterior features if approved. This was approved." Valerie snapped. "Approved under misleading wording." I raised an eyebrow. "European heritage garden wall aesthetic?" "You knew exactly what you were doing." "Of course I did. That's why I used the rules." The room went quiet for half a second, then murmured with satisfaction. Valerie's authority was built on everyone assuming the rulebook belonged to her. But tonight, that same rulebook sat on the table, highlighted, copied, and aiming directly back at her. Elaine cleared her throat. "I move to dismiss the fine against Lot 27 and affirm the fence replacement approval provided the structure remains within submitted dimensions, approved materials, and county compliance." Howard immediately raised his hand. "Second." Valerie turned toward him. "Howard, this fence has battlements." Howard looked at the photo again. "Yes, tastefully spaced." That broke the room. Even Don Richards smiled, which felt like seeing a courthouse statue wink. "All in favor?" Elaine asked. Elaine raised her hand. Howard raised his. Patricia raised hers while already typing. 3 votes. Valerie's hand stayed flat on the table. "The motion passes," Elaine said. "Fine dismissed. Fence approval affirmed." The clubhouse erupted. Not wild cheering, but that deeply satisfying neighbor applause where everyone knows they have just witnessed a petty empire lose a border war. Valerie gathered her papers with the stiff, angry movements of someone trying to fold reality back into shape. She looked at me across the table. "This neighborhood is not a theme park," she said. "No," I said. "It's a gated community. I just upgraded the gate." The applause got louder. 2 days later, the official email arrived. My balance was 0. The fence was officially listed as an approved, historically inspired privacy boundary. Valerie attempted to add a postscript forbidding castle-like interpretations of future repairs, but Patricia refused to include it because, according to the minutes, castle-like was not an enforceable architectural term. I printed that sentence and framed it. The fortress fence stayed. Nolan finished the side sections the following week, and I will admit, the final result was absurd. Beautiful, but absurd. Dark walnut cedar ran around my backyard like a miniature stronghold. The gate had iron-style straps, faux stone post caps, and a little carved plaque inside that read, "Reed Keep." Duke loved it. He patrolled the fence every morning like the commander of the Royal Guard, sniffing along the battlements and pausing near the gate with heroic seriousness. Mr. Alvarez started calling him Sir Duke, and after a while, the name stuck. The best part came during the next storm. Another branch came down, this time from the same maple tree. It hit the new fence, bounced off the reinforced upper rail, and landed harmlessly in the yard. Not one board cracked, not one post shifted. Duke stood on the porch and barked once, as if announcing that the fortress had held. Valerie drove by that afternoon in her white SUV. She slowed near my property, looked at the fence, then quickly looked away when she saw me standing by the gate. I raised a hand. Not a wave, more like a lord acknowledging a defeated visitor at the outer wall. So remember this from Sovereign Verdict. Subscribe for more stories, read every rule twice, and never let an HOA Karen call your fence repair ugly unless she is ready to see the entire property line transformed into a medieval fortress wall with county approval, board minutes, and one very proud German shepherd guarding the kingdom.